It's Chef for Death again. I'm your host, Eric Chiappetta, and today I think we have one of the best and most fascinating panel that we've had on the show yet. This is season 1, episode 4. We actually have a studio audience today. Can we hear from you guys? Love that idea. Soon we'll have a house band and we'll be taking over David Letterman's position, or if he's still around. I am Eric Chiappetta. This is Chef for Death. If you're not familiar, we deal with kind of food and beverage ideas, lives kind of under an entrepreneurial umbrella. So who better to have than people that are more important to the food and beverage industry in Denver than the people that write about them, the individuals that critique them, and I think we have a fantastic panel that we will introduce shortly. The idea of this show is basically, I want to kind of demystify what a food writer / critic is. I think for the most part, early in my career when I owned restaurants, I was scared to fucking death of anybody that was going to come in, write about my restaurant, critique my restaurant, especially when it's in this realm of, oh, it's my art, or we just want to go under the radar but still get press, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that to these guys as well. Really want you guys to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at Chef for Death. Find me on Instagram or Twitter at Eric_Chiappetta, 2 P's, 2 T's, or cheffordeath.com, where all of that information can be found. Subscribe, share. Find me on iTunes. That's new for us this week too. We have all the episodes on there, so download, share, listen, enjoy, that sort of thing, whatever you do with your podcast time. Our panel today, like I said, are some of the most influential and high-powered food writers and literally some of the most important people on the side of media. And we're going to really dive as deep as we possibly can with them today. To my very, very far left is Mark Antonation. He's the Westward Food and Drink editor. He actually got his start by going up and down Federal Boulevard and literally eating his way through Federal Boulevard. If you're not familiar with Federal Boulevard and you're not privy to our city, Federal has some of the most amazing ethnic cuisine that you can find in Denver, all really kind of bunched into one boulevard that goes on and on and on forever. He has covered Denver Metro's diverse food and beverage scene, as well as the city's quickly changing restaurant landscape. Mark was awarded Outstanding Media Professional by the Colorado Restaurant Association in 2018. Thanks for joining us, Mark. Oh, that's like this year.
Yeah. So
Right now.
I was really excited about that.
Super high-powered people on this show. Oh, my God. Speaking of, Denise Mickelson is responsible for overseeing all of 5280's food and drink coverage, which encompasses everything delicious that's grown, crafted, and cooked in Colorado. Mickelson is an award-winning editor who has worked in the test kitchens of Saveur, Martha Stewart Living magazines, and on the editorial staff at Fine Cooking. Not actually Phil Mickelson's wife, which kind of is a severe bummer,
a bummer for everybody.
Really, honestly.
That would be nice.
Except he completely screwed up his last golf tournament.
Except sports ball.
And sports ball stuff.
But I'm married to
Crickets.
Bill Mickelson, and he's fantastic.
Bill Mickelson, everyone. Absolutely. To my direct left is Rebecca Treon, a Denver-based freelance food and travel lifestyle writer who has written for publications like BBC Travel, The Huffington Post, 5280, Dining Out, Edible Denver, and The Denver Post, and many other national and international publications. Welcome, Rebecca Treon.
Thank you.
Way over to my far right is Amanda Faison. Amanda spent 20 years at 5280 Magazine, 12 of which as their food editor. She oversaw all the magazine's food-related coverage and was Denver's go-to dining resource. She has written about food for national titles such as Sunset Magazine, Food and Wine, and Cooking Light. Her Ranch to Plate feature Soul Food was anthologized in Best Food Writing 2010. In addition, she has twice sat as judge for the James Beard Foundation's annual Cookbook Awards, and in 2014, Faison edited her first cookbook, 5280, The Cookbook. That's
Cookbook.
The Cookbook. Wonderful resource, by the way.
Thank you.
In 2016, she was named the Outstanding Media Professional of the Year by the Colorado Restaurant Association, predating Mark by 2 years. She recently completed 2 more cookbooks while she's relaxing at home, and she currently freelances for multiple publications and sits as the editorial director of the Good Food Media Network. Welcome, Amanda Faison.
Thank you.
Like I said, I am wildly beyond over the moon that these 4 individuals would be on this show, and thanks for making and not breaking this show. So,
It hasn't been very long.
cheers, everyone. So, we've had wine, so that kind of helps all of this.
Cheers.
Okay.
Cheers, salute.
Cheers.
So on that note, I say let's do a fucking show. What inspired you to be food writers? I casually throw out whoever wants to answer can kind of do that. I can direct them to anybody, but really, why'd you become a food writer, Mark?
Well, I love food. I love writing. And it took me 45 years to figure out that there are jobs where you can do both. So I was a technical writer for a long time, and I was kind of bored with that. And I worked in restaurants when I was younger, and always loved to cook at home. And I had friends and my wife who were encouraging me to go a different route with writing. So I started doing that, and now here I am.
Right. Well, you're the food editor for Westward. That clearly,
He does a damn good job.
yeah, you do a damn good job.
Yeah,
Rebecca?
he really does.
I just want to say that you're the guy that's always like, I don't know, like infusing some sort of liqueur in my kitchen. And then I went to this other, market to find these really authentic ingredients. And this is just this little kitchen experiment that I'm trying out. And the rest of us are sitting there like, or at least I am sitting there like, what? This is why it's a genuine passion. And that totally comes through.
Well,
And
and
that's
True.
I've been to
Why?
her house too, and she's,
Oh.
doing Argentinian dinners.
All I
and,
had was the Trump pinata.
yeah, and the Trump pinata, which
I want a Trump pinata.
We had to
all
borrow
need-
an
I think
aluminum
you need
baseball
a
bat
Trump
from across the
pinata.
street.
you haven't
Next
seen.
show is the Trump Pinata. We're
The
definitely having
outtakes
that
are
named
Trump
somewhere.
pinata, and we're all going.
You
in.
haven't
It's
seen-
gonna drop
Absolutely.
the mic. It is
10-year-old
totally
kids
Trump
have fun until
pinata. Next show.
They were like, it's unbreakable. Yeah, sadly true. So I actually started out as an art major and then lived in Capitol Hill, and my neighbor taught in public school and was like, we really need teachers that are competent. And I spoke Spanish, and so I got a teaching license because they had that alternative program. So I did that for like 6 years, and all the while I was saying, I really want to be a writer. I really love to be a travel writer. I didn't think that was actually a job. So,
It's one of those things where you see people doing it and don't know the route.
How do you get
Exactly.
How do you do that?
right.
Yeah.
And then all of a
Exactly.
sudden, you're like, hate to talk about myself at all, but that's exactly what this is. This is, I want a fucking talk show. Okay, so let's just make one.
Let's just do
so
it.
I
Yeah,
just
you
did.
Just do it.
yeah.
Right. So kind of along the same lines as you is you just started.
Yeah, well, I started a blog, and my ex-husband is Argentinian, so it was a blog about that, about recipes and stuff. And actually,
It was
Amanda,
a great
thank
blog.
you. Oh my
A
gosh, you're so
great blog.
sweet. So Amanda, like, it happened to work out that her intern left, and I became like a 38-year-old intern, and the kids are all like 23. The other,
This is when Amanda was the editor for 5280.
and I was
Food
her intern.
editor.
Food editor. Sorry, food editor
Okay.
for 5280.
I was played by Robert De Niro in the movie The Intern. So, but she said, "Well, hey, this works out perfectly because you're really looking for something like a way to sort of get real experience, not just blogging, real magazine experience." And like it really went from there. I mean, really. So I'm still in touch with the kids, though.
Good.
I was mom.
Good.
Still.
Amanda, how'd you start?
Well, I kind of knew I was going to be a writer since I was about 8 years old. And it just kind of took different forms. So at one point I wanted to be like a romance novelist, not when I was 8. But, you know, at some point there was that. Then I wanted to be a travel writer because, like, who doesn't want to be a travel writer, right? And then I got my job at 5280 right out of college or shortly after college. And there were 3 of us on staff.
Wow.
And doing everything. That wasn't 3 in the editorial department. That was 3 on staff.
Right. For
And
those of you that are watching not in Denver, 5280 is a legit magazine.
City magazine.
City
One of the best
magazine.
in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can hold it.
And
It's
profiles
like an
everything.
actual magazine.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle mag. I mean, it's a city magazine. So I started there, and no one else had the interest in sort of editing the food stuff. And I've come from a long line of really terrific cooks. I love food, love exploring food and culture through food. And so that kind of fell onto my plate. And I was at the magazine for about 20 years. And ultimately, Denver kind of grew up during that time and
Right.
started to have a dining scene. So I got lucky. I got to cover the food scene. I got to cover the restaurants. And eventually that became my sole job. So I had a restaurant critic who worked for me. I was never a critic, but I was a food writer and a food editor.
Right.
And continue to I just think food is
Well,
such a window into culture.
I think it's interesting that you say that Denver grew up around the time that 5280 was just starting.
Yeah.
Whereas in my perspective, 5280 had a lot to do with Denver growing up as well.
That's interesting.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I
no,
hope
it was
so,
a
yeah.
big deal for us to be in your magazine when I was first starting out too. I mean, that was
Awesome.
that was a big mountain to climb. So I think you guys you're being modest in saying that Denver grew up and you were
Well,
a byproduct
there's
of
also
it.
a lot of things that happened during that time. I mean, the Food Network launched.
Right.
That was 2000 is when the Food Network launched, 2000, 2001. And that changed food across the nation,
For
maybe
sure.
even the world. And suddenly local chefs became celebrities. And,
Right.
you know, local food, whether it was actually, you know, regionally specific food or just good food, became something that was coverable and something that people wanted
to read
the
about.
yeah, our readers wanted to learn more about. So
Right.
I think that there's a whole kind of crescendo sort of effect there. I don't think it was just 5280 or just Denver. I think it was a national change and complete shift that
Interesting.
you're seeing the effects of that now, the
Right.
lasting effects.
Right. Denise?
Completely different path altogether. I came in through the kitchen door. So I was a history major, and I thought I'd work in museums. And then I thought, no, I like working with people too much. I don't want to be, either stuck in an archive or stuck in a museum. So I was living in New York City, and I was doing fundraising just to have a job. And I decided to go to culinary school because at the time it never occurred to me to go to journalism school. I thought, I want to write about food. I love to cook. I read about food all the time. I'll go to culinary school. I'll learn the real things you're supposed to learn. And so I did. And all my instructors said, you have to cook in restaurants. And I didn't want to be a chef, but they all insisted, and they were completely right. So I started working in restaurants in New York, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I was very lucky and got an internship at the Saveur Test Kitchen. So Saveur magazine, which still exists, although is sadly published far less now than it was this global look at food and culture and people and
That's the best.
anthropology.
I've been a subscriber since day one.
the funny thing was I wanted to end up there. I
Right.
thought, I'll become a food writer and someday I'll be there. And I was an intern in the kitchen. And it was because of my restaurant experience that they let me walk in the door.
Right.
So I would go around New York with my Metro card and do all the shopping and buy eels in Chinatown and buy, durian in Jackson Heights and Queens and bring it all back. And we would test recipes from all over the world.
In the most gorgeous test kitchen.
Amazing.
So beautiful.
It was the most bizarre thing to start there. And then there was a big shakeup because it was media. And I actually came back from my honeymoon and the art department had been fired and the publisher had been let go, like all craziness. And our editor-in-chief at the time, Coleman Andrews, said, everyone get your resumes together. We don't know what's going to happen. We're probably going to fold. We
Wow.
don't know. And so we all started putting out our resumes. And I ended up going over to Martha Stewart Living. And I was in their test kitchen and came up with recipes for that magazine and learned how to be a food stylist. And then that was a hard place to work. So after a couple years,
Because Martha,
no pressure.
or just because of, or does it all
that's a
trickle
whole
down?
show. That's a very different show. It's a trickle down situation.
Gotcha.
When someone as brilliant and polarizing as Martha Stewart is at the top, the stress, I think,
Sure.
trickles down. And then people are perhaps not their best selves.
Interesting.
That's one way to put it. So
That's what we call in the business is dirt. We just got dirt. Oh my God.
no, it's a good thing to have on your resume. It's a tricky thing to live through. I thought I should become a real estate agent. I should just get out of this altogether by the end of that. But I didn't. And I went to Fine Cooking Magazine and I went out of the kitchen onto the story side. So the funny thing is I was not a writer first. I was a cook first. Then I was an editor,
Wow.
finding authors for stories and, from chefs to cookbook authors and all that, and working on the recipes with them and working on the copy with them. And I loved editing. And I thought, I thought I wanted to be a food writer, but I actually wanted to be an editor. I didn't know that. But you do get to write when you're an editor. So I wrote a number of stories there. And then I thought I'm going to get out of print altogether because everyone knows, right? Print is dying. So I found this job at Craftsy, which is in Denver. And I left Connecticut and moved to Denver to work for this digital media company
That's how you got here?
That's how I got here.
Mm.
They made cooking and baking videos as well as knitting and quilting and all sorts of other things, hence the name Craftsy. And they brought me out to bring in instructors to teach their cooking videos. And I did that for 2 years. And then I met Amanda
Super randomly. at
very
Food and Wine.
randomly. I'd been hiking with my son and I needed a shower, and then I bump into her, and I'd been wanting to meet her for years. So that was kind of mortifying, but we met and we kind of hit it off and we started having coffee back in Denver.
Mm.
And the next thing you know, she decides to move to the mountains.
Well, let me intercept here for
Please.
a second because I knew I was leaving the magazine when we first started talking.
But I didn't know that.
And
Right.
She tricked.
and I had coffee with her. So we met at Food and Wine, and then we had coffee together, and I left that interview or left that like chat.
I was not interviewing.
No, you weren't interviewing, but left that chat and called my husband. I was like, I just met my replacement.
Wow.
And no one knew I was leaving the magazine at this point. I mean, this was
Wow.
like super, super new. My husband and I had made this decision, but I mean, it was so crazily meant to be. In fact, she ended up buying a house that I used to live in.
Holy
But I didn't
cow.
know that.
And yeah,
I
and,
did not
and
know
we
that.
didn't know that.
Oh,
and all of
wow.
a sudden in
This is
conversation,
going to make me come off as weird. I'm not.
so it was,
single
I
white
was
female.
putting we were putting our house on the market. And my old house from several years before was, 3 blocks away or something like that. And she was buying a house. And somehow we figured out that she was buying the house that I used to live in, 15 years ago. That was 3
Wow.
blocks from the house that I was putting on the market.
Your house has
It
a
was-
5280
My
ghost
son
in it.
yeah, and I was
bedroom
at 5280 at that
is
point.
her old bedroom.
Yeah, it's my old bedroom.
Wow.
Bizarre.
Weird.
Yeah, very weird.
Anyway, sorry to
But now I
intersect
have her
the story.
job. And so, yeah. So I have her job in her house.
So not single white female. Huh.
Not weird at all.
Yeah.
It's totally normal.
Stalker.
Little Denver, man, the incestuousness of Little
Be a
Denver.
food editor? You just gotta do what I did.
How funny.
I can't believe you told that story.
So, food writing, in the essence of all of it, is you have to go to these places, you have to experience them, you have to kind of digest in many different ways what a restaurant is about, what it's portraying, what it's doing for the community, what it's doing, what its thing is. How do you write about a bad experience?
Good question.
Or do you?
I think you do. I don't know. I mean, some people only write positive things, and that can be fine. But I think if you want to actually give context to a place, you write about whether it's good or bad. But that doesn't necessarily, I was never a restaurant critic, but
We should explain that, right?
Yeah,
Don't
there
you
is a
think we
big
should?
difference.
What
Yeah.
is a restaurant critic
Absolutely.
and a restaurant reviewer, and what is a food editor or a food writer? Because
Okay.
that's what everyone says, right? I mean, I think we would all say that.
yeah.
Oh, you're a restaurant critic. No, not at all.
Right.
So at 5280, same restaurant critic, Scott Mowbray. She hired him. I still edit him.
He's amazing.
He's wonderful. And I tell him she used to where to go, what restaurants, here's the lineup. He goes and he takes all of his experience and, everything that he knows and all of his skills to kind of putting his argument out there for is this restaurant doing what it is supposed to be doing, what
Right.
it says it's going to do.
And goes a minimum of 3 times.
Yep.
Right.
Too, to give you
Right.
the sense of,
Which
you
is
know,
kind of
you can
protocol
hit a-
I'm used to as well.
it is.
Right.
And we let the
but we've
restaurant be
sent
open for a
him-
certain amount of time.
Or when I was still there,
You can
I
just
mean, we
say we.
sent him up to 7 times.
Right.
I mean, if there were just some wacky things happening at this restaurant, we would send him multiple,
Especially
you know.
if it's something that hadn't happened to you and you'd been.
Yeah.
Like there are sometimes
Exactly.
he'll come back and be like, "Oh, this was weird." I'm like, "I thought it was wonderful." Like, go
Right.
again.
Or
I
a chef
also
had changed
think-
in the middle of it, or
Yeah.
something
Right,
had
yeah.
happened.
Ugh.
You know, you send a restaurant critic back as many times as you have to get what feels like
A complete picture.
yes, exactly. And sometimes you end up pulling a review. You'll pull that and slot in something else at the last second that he's already started on,
Right.
but wasn't intended to go in January. Maybe it was intended to go in March or February.
Right.
But if something just isn't right, or there's a big shakeup, I mean,
Or the chef
there's a
leaves
lot
or
of
something.
integrity
Yeah.
there that you have to weigh that. There's a lot of power that comes out with a review.
Oh, yeah.
And it needs to come out at the right time.
Right.
And never feel, if it's a bad review, never feel like you're taking advantage of like a bad point in the
It
restaurant
has to be
history.
fully informed, and
I think
based
one
on
of the things too,
fact.
sorry, is that has been, I mean, sort of this like history of food critics that are either really known and really prominent and people are scared, or like they literally go in disguises so that they're not recognized, or perhaps they impersonate people. Like I remember somebody actually impersonated you and your husband, which was great.
Yeah, it'll
And,
happen. It'll happen to you too. Believe me. Somebody, yeah.
But
it happens
but
like
now our
Yeah.
faces are known, and we can go out and say like, I'm so and so, and I'm writing about so and so. I'm learning about what your project is. I'm learning about what you're doing, and that's a vast difference than
That's a
being this
different
sort of like under the radar critic.
Well,
you
and
know.
whether you're known or not, you would never walk into a restaurant and be like, I'm Amanda Faison. I'm here to eat dinner, and you know,
what you got.
yeah,
Do you know who I am?
Right.
Right.
yeah. Do
Or
you know
even-
who I am? You would go as under the radar as possible, and hopefully, no one pays any attention to you,
Right.
and you
That's
just
your
have the
dream.
real.
You don't want anyone to know
experience.
you're there, so
Right.
you can
So-
just be like anyone
And you
else.
wanna-
When you get a
hope
call
that they
from a
give the same
restaurant,
service.
Yeah, or when
Yeah.
you get a call from a restaurant saying like, "So, how was your meal last night? You know, we heard you were here." It's like,
Interesting.
no, and not, and like you have the credit card receipts to prove that you weren't there that night.
Right.
It'll happen to you, and yeah. So
Like
so beware, all you bloggers.
Mark.
And yeah, so there is a big difference between, a restaurant is opening, so they say, come on in, interview the chef, eat some
Yeah,
of our
check
food.
it out.
In the middle of the day, usually, like that's a
Yeah.
media preview.
Right.
And
Inviting
Westward
you
is
in.
in the same situation as 5280, where we have a restaurant critic, Gretchen Kurtz, who is
Who
anonymous.
used to be our restaurant critic, by the way.
Really?
Denver's
guess I
not a
knew
very
that.
large
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, is evaluating based on the criteria that is set forth as a restaurant critic. Whereas Denise and I both are in positions where we are evaluating and criticizing, but we're, say, awarding the best. You know, we so far we haven't been asked to say the 25 worst restaurants in Denver yet, and
God.
thank God.
Let's hope
And I do think that
But there is evaluation that goes into that. But
Yeah.
you know, for me, and I think Denise is the same way, is we're not evaluating a restaurant the day we go in and they haven't even opened,
Yeah,
and we're
right.
eating their food.
no.
And I mean, if I'm eating food at a restaurant preview, it's to get an idea of what the chef is doing and the flavors they're working with and the techniques and
And
everything
why.
like that. So that you
what
can
they're trying to
describe
do.
that to
And
your
those
reader.
people that solicit that are
Yeah.
interested in getting press from
And like an opening
And
report
feedback.
is
They're
not a
interested in
review.
feedback too.
Yeah.
Right.
And they want feedback.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So they want feedback before they open, and then they, of course, would like you to write and say, you know, Marin is opening next week, or
We're on the
whatever is
radar.
opening, and everybody get excited and start making your reservations. What I try to focus on is like, here's the things I loved. This is
Right.
what's super exciting. This is what they're trying to do. That's not a review. A
Right.
review is they've been open for a while, they are established, and you know, you're trying to convey their personality and
That's
And
you
the
know, what they're
review
all
always
about.
comes from the same person.
Yes.
Right.
It's always going to come from Scott at 5280, or it's always going to come from Gretchen at Westward.
So how do those guys protect anonymity? Like
That's
that was
what's
always the
hard.
thing. Like I remember, you know, I still owned restaurants when Jason Sheehan was here, and I would get caricatures of him thrown at me verbally. I know I know exactly what he looks like. He looks like this, this, and this, and this, and I'm like, that's not a thing for me. Like, how is there? Do they
he
have a
looks like
credit
every
card
guy.
that says something different? Like, how does that
Jason
happen?
did.
Yeah, there's a lot of different
Yeah.
ways you can do it.
Fake names.
You can,
when
yeah,
you make
have
a
a credit
reservation,
card that's not
a friend makes
yours.
a reservation.
You can make your reservations under.
Although by the time the credit
You
card
can pay in
happens, the
cash.
meal's already over. So
Yeah.
what's the point of? I mean, I don't know. What's the point?
I mean,
of that?
Stacy Brugman, our critic before Scott, used to go in disguise, which, I mean, good for her.
That's
Can you
crazy.
imagine
I
going to a
can't
restaurant in
even imagine.
disguise and feeling
In
like okay
Denver?
about it? Yes.
I mean, that's
That's
the
Yes,
awesome.
she had multiple wigs, and
Ruth Reichel, who was the critic at the New York Times, she had, I heard, I don't know this is a fact, but I heard that they gave her a different credit card every week.
Right.
And, you know, she definitely had wigs and glasses and the whole thing. But in New York, you can dress crazy and no one thinks anything of it.
Right.
Here, it would be bizarre.
Right.
yeah.
I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, what ethical standards are kind of set up for you guys? Like, does 5280 or Westward, or even as a freelancer, what ethics are kind of, we can't do this? Like, we were off air, we were talking about the health department and kind of challenges with those guys. Like, I can't offer the health department guy or gal a cup of coffee. They just refuse it flatly. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, we're the hospitality business. Like, that's just kind of what we do. Like, you're going to march around my restaurant for an hour. Do you want something to drink with that? Like,
Yeah.
they just flatly won't do it.
Yeah.
What kind of ethical standards are in place for even food writers and also critics?
I think that's actually really important because there are a lot of what is the phrase, the influencers out there. And influencers in general, I think the definition is that they receive free services and or food or what have you, and then they promote through their social media channels. At 52,
Always positive.
right, and it's always
So
positive.
pretty.
I mean, I think I'm not
Right.
exact. I'm not. I don't know.
And
I'm not an influencer.
And I guess
but-
I asked this question because you guys have been in this business for so long.
well, and influencers are relatively new.
Right.
You know,
But your relationships
Avenue.
with people, I sat in on a seminar at the Colorado Restaurant Show, and everyone except for Amanda was on the panel. And
I was, I don't know, gallivanting around.
skiing or something.
and John Imbergano brought up a good point of the best way to get your ear is to develop a relationship with you. Okay, so that being said, clearly there's some groundwork that's been laid.
Right.
Now I know you. So how does ethics play into a authentic review, a authentic writing of what my project is?
Totally fair question. I think for me, when I was writing about something, if I didn't like something, if I didn't like the direction or whatever, what I did was I stuck to the story. It didn't matter what my relationship was with that person.
Right.
And I mean, 25 Best, you get flogged for 25 Best every year. And Denise knows all about it because it came out last week, and we actually had some conversations about conversations that you had to have.
So
and
5280 just did their 25 best restaurants, and all throughout social media, you hear from all of the people that were, you guys were
lots.
gracious enough
But
to
not even-
include,
But not even, yes.
but the
love
other
from people who
7,000
did.
restaurants that may have felt
Everyone
that
else
they
is
could have
upset.
been involved. Oh,
snubbed and
our
yeah.
tacos are better than this guy's. What are you guys thinking? That sort of conversation. But
Right. And also the readers. I
Right.
mean, we're in a moment in time where on social media people feel very free to say any negative thing that comes into their head and their
Right.
little clicky clacky fingers. So,
Right.
we get all kinds of comments, even though we work on that story for the readers. Some of them are not appreciative and say mean things.
But
that's okay.
that's one of those, what the top 25 list is also, and your 100 restaurants you can't live without, are both
Essential.
sort of like educated opinions. So if
Absolutely.
It's
that has nothing to
subjective.
do like with
Right.
this type of stories that I write. So my son today was saying, and he's almost 12, and he said, I don't understand this whole thing about fake news. How can you have fake news? And I said, well, this is a great question, because when you're a writer and you have integrity, you go back and you fact check, and it's not making sure that the town name is right and the person's spelling is right. I mean, it's that too, but that you're not like making it sound like some polished marketing piece. You are sharing the story, the like little ins and outs that interest you. And that's where I think a lot of the integrity comes in too, is where you're just not like piping out a bunch of positive marketing kind of stuff, but you're
Or parroting
still have
press
to fact
releases.
check
You're
it.
giving
Yeah.
context to it too. Does this fit in with whatever the context is that you're discussing? I mean,
And also opinion, because
Yeah.
food is so subjective.
right.
I mean, we are food writers. We could all go
You're
to the same
professional food
taco
writers.
restaurant. We could go to the same restaurant and eat the same taco.
this has
and
happened.
3 of us might hate it. 1 of us might love it. Like it's subjective.
but all 4 of those people would have different stories to take
Right.
from it.
Right.
You know,
Also What's the true. story
So
you
you
write
talk about
Right.
you talk about this. One person talks about this recipe. One person talks about the history. One person talks about whatever it is. I mean, and that's the beauty, I think, of a writer who cares and has a background in, if not journalism, at least kind of understanding how stories are told, instead of just, I had the carnitas and they were good, or they were dry, or they wrapped them in a corn tortilla instead of a,
God bless Yelp.
whatever. Like,
Right.
to understand food, you have to look so much bigger than just what's sitting on the plate.
Right.
And that's a good food writer. That relationship that you have with the chef or the owner doesn't touch that understanding of how to tell a story.
So would you find the reason why the world didn't make me a food journalist or a critic is because I don't know that I would push away against my relationship with the restaurant or the chef almost as a default, because my number one rule is authenticity.
Mhm.
And I would almost err on the side of, I would 51% a bad review of a restaurant so that I could
Or if
remain.
You weren't playing favorites.
Yeah. So that I could, my brother Joe's hot dog place, if I wasn't super enthusiastic about the reindeer antler bun that they
Antler.
just brought out. I hope I'm not touching on anybody's
Which, by the way,
thing.
is so trendy right now.
The-
Ground the antlers down for the
I'm on
flour,
social
and it's
media a little
gluten-free.
too much.
Totally
It is gluten free. Yes.
Grain-free, gluten-free.
That I would almost err on the side of a negative review or
a negative write-up.
yeah,
Story.
just so that I could remain my readers
Well, we're
would
ignoring the nitty-gritty. So I can't, I can only speak for 5280. We do not take any free food. We do not.
Yeah.
We pay for everything. So I was recently having an uncomfortable but very honest conversation about the list and why a particular group wasn't on it. And I met them at their coffee shop, and they would not allow me to pay for the tea that I ordered. And so I took cash and I put it in the tip jar and I paid for the tea.
right.
So it might not have shown up on the receipt, but we make sure we pay for everything so we don't owe anyone anything, and
Right.
we can be completely objective. We also, I tend to believe in not wasting either print geography or even space online. If I hate something, I might actually choose not to write about it if I don't have to for any reason. So, if there's an opening and I just don't think that they're ready yet, and I don't think that it's great yet, then I might not write about it, and I'll go back in a few months
Okay, so that's
and then see.
that's really the answer that I was kind of fishing for was if a restaurant was in a position where they weren't going to get at all a positive review, that you would put it aside and let them kind of either reinvent what their concept was, or like we were talking earlier, the chef left and I'm in the middle of trying to review these guys. So how fair is that?
That hasn't happened to me yet. I have not covered something, not in a full review. If I assign something to Scott and he is out and he is eating and we don't have any major, like the chef left, the restaurant burned down, I don't
Right.
know, whatever, then even if it's a place I sent him because I thought he would like it, which tends to be, I try to send him to places I think that are good, we'll still run it. I
Right.
mean, we have run a number of reviews in the 2 years I've been there that have hurt me to read, and I'm sure were not fun for the restaurant owners. They were not great reviews. He didn't like it.
Right.
That's his opinion. He's our reviewer, and we stick by it. Once he is assigned, I tend to run it.
It's also-
when I run it, I might hold it a little bit. It depends on the time.
It's also
Right.
important because 5280 has 12 restaurant reviews a year.
That's it.
Yeah.
12 restaurants. So you're picking high profile restaurants that people are going to. They are paying money
Right.
to go to. And they need to know, hopefully everything is spectacular and wonderful.
Sure.
But sometimes it isn't. And they need to know that there might be there might be some fantastic things, but there may be some problems in this realm, or skip dessert and go somewhere else.
Right.
Or, skip the cocktails and have a beer. Those are important things to know for the reader because you're paying money to go there. And there's so many places to go. I think
And
it's
it keeps
important
the
that everything
reader-
isn't positive.
And it keeps the reader involved in your integrity as well. That
Yeah, and for example,
like not everything's shiny.
yeah,
Right.
At Westward, we do Best of Denver in the spring, and we had a situation where we had decided on our best new restaurant, and we found out before we go into press that the chef had left.
Always happens. So
Yeah,
it's-
and,
Right at
and we
the
had the
last minute
opportunity to look
first.
at it and say,
Mm-hmm.
can we give it the best restaurant in Denver if the guy who's in charge of the food is no longer there?
And the food you
And fortunately,
tasted
we had
and
enough
based that
time to
decision
go
on.
back and reevaluate, and we gave we did a different restaurant, and that's tough because somebody maybe is in that restaurant expecting something because they feel like the restaurant has been putting out a great product for so long, and then there's a change up, and
But that was because you didn't know, if there's a brand new chef coming in, that means that restaurant is all of a sudden
Yeah.
different, and you might not have experienced it. So
and we and,
kind of
and
has
we're
to make
sending
that
like
choice.
you said, we're sending readers there to spend money, and so we can say, well, maybe it's going to be as good, but we'd rather
what if
say
it
here's a
isn't?
place that we know is excellent,
Right.
Right.
as opposed to some place that is up in the air right now. and hey, there's always next year.
Well, and clearly you guys understand the weight that you carry as well. That, yeah, I mean, if you had your heart set on Joe's Schmuckatelli's burger joint to be the best restaurant in Denver,
My favorite restaurant.
I do think, going back to relationship, you were asking about what weight a relationship bears when looking at something, when you're writing about it. There's a lot of times where a chef will call you and say, I'm leaving.
right?
Even if they know that in 10 days the magazine's going to come out or the story is going to come out, and they'll call you ahead of time. And so sometimes you have time to do damage control and change things up. Other times, for magazines in particular, it's gone. It's
Right.
a press. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
But
you
at
guys, you said you're in the middle of writing December right now.
Oh, December was due 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm late.
So you can really get kind of screwed on that front, but that's where a relationship comes in. Like,
Right.
I'm leaving, I just want you to know, so at least you can be prepared with the blog when the magazine hits newsstands.
Right.
But it doesn't. That, I think, is when the relationship like bears like real weight, when you just kind of have that inside information, as opposed to, I like this person, I'm going to give them, I'm going to write like nice things about them because I like them.
Right.
It just doesn't really kind of filter in on
Right.
that front.
I think that one of the really great things too is because, Westward is sort of daily and weekly, is they get to cover all of those like unsung heroes. I mean, that's how you got
Definitely.
your start with the
Absolutely.
Federal. That's how we became friends, was all that like, the Federal restaurant crawl, taco trucks and all that stuff. And so there has to be a place for that in food journalism. And I think I have a different perspective than all of you because for me, I can maybe go to a restaurant and have an experience, or find a place on my own and have an experience, and it'll still take me, 6 months to find the right home, like the right publication. And sometimes if it's a PR person, they will email me and kind of, you can tell they're a little bit irritated, like, hey, we're waiting to see that that article. And it may take time, but when it does come around, they're like, oh yeah, that's great. And it's better than just some, social media blip that you put out or whatever.
Right.
So there are all sorts of different facets, I think, for what all of us do.
And it's not all just restaurants either.
Right.
I mean, there are lots and lots and lots
so
of
many food
Colorado
experiences.
stories. And
Yeah.
then you get to tell even non-Colorado stories, which Mark and I don't really get to tell.
Well, and I have so much respect for freelance writers in general because,
Absolutely.
for me, if I'm hungry and I want lunch, I'm going to go get a sandwich somewhere, and I don't have to worry about, do I need to slot that sandwich in somewhere 6 months down the road? Whereas for freelancers, you are.
I'm the worst. I'm just like ramen noodles for breakfast. I had an icy at Skate City the other day. I'm like, I'm fired.
But it's going to be like 10 best ices in
Right.
the Rocky Mountain
somewhere.
region or something in Sunset.
She'll use it.
Rebecca knows what I have for. What do I have for dinner?
Cereal.
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 Chefs.
What kind of cereal?
Yeah.
Cheerios is on the because it was on
What
sale.
kind of Cheerios?
Just regular. I'm a
many
purist. I'm curious too. We've talked about social media and things like that. You had brought up Yelp. What has that done to your industry?
Oh, Lord.
And it's given us the best source of entertainment
Seriously.
of any.
Us too.
Because we don't own
Reading
restaurants. I don't think
material
it's
out
very
there.
entertaining for restaurateurs. But
Wait, you
oh
don't
my
use it as
God.
a source?
Oh my God.
I think it's fun and it's entertaining, but it's also useful to kind of skim Yelp and see, like, well, what do regular diners say about this place? Usually they're just
You
bitching
can't
about
say
the
that you
price.
don't.
It's
But-
useful to feel depressed.
Right.
Like, because
I
you
think
look at
it's-
what comes up in the and you're like,
you feel bad for.
oh my God,
owner
these are the top
operators.
10 restaurants in Denver or the top 10 restaurants wherever. I mean, to me, it is interesting to read them, but it's like, oh my God,
find
this
it-
does not tell you the scope of a scene at all.
I have to say that
But if you look at like an individual,
some of my
restaurant,
favorite.
it's kind of interesting.
It
to
is
see what
interesting.
people are
Who's
saying.
that one guy he was like the Yelper, but he's so poetic.
Oh,
What is his name?
Well,
you guys had the thing.
Okay, so I fall down rabbit holes with Yelp, and so I end up reading like reviews of strip clubs, which are hilarious.
You just read the articles, Mark?
Yeah,
Right?
just an article. But there's nothing funnier than a Yelp review about a strip club. So
Fascinating.
Yeah, we're all
Second I
going to
get
be.
home.
Me too.
For the one who used to want to write romance novels, like,
Oh, God,
Right.
totally.
but I have to say, I have also found some of my favorite, maybe not favorite restaurants, but favorite dishes in town, just from cruising
You can
Yelp
find the right Yelper.
and
right.
and finding something that. I'll give an example. There's a place called Sticky Fingers Barbecue. Sorry if that's am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
And they just opened in this shack in the middle of Arvada, like in an industrial section of Arvada that, under the right circumstances could be the next Rhino of Arvada. And they do, this guy's got a smoker in the back that he put Harley tailpipes on because he didn't like the way the smoke was drawing. And it's just, it's nothing amazing, but it's good barbecue.
Right.
It's a good sandwich. And it was so fun to talk to him and find out his story. And that's, maybe you're not always finding the best food, but you're finding a story.
Well, and
you're
Mark-
finding people who
Yeah.
are making food.
point.
And that's what I love.
Yeah, Mark
It's a little
Mines.
bit like StoryCorps
Yeah,
for
you're like
food.
one of the best miner as far as
Yeah,
like
big
seekers
time.
of interesting things too.
yeah,
It does.
agreed.
I was telling Amanda that our colleague,
Our like spectacular Callie.
Callie,
She's
our associate food
Keeps everything
editor
good
at
together.
5280. There are a few Yelpers she follows purposefully because they know the really great spots in Denver that are not the fancy, shiny, high-profile restaurants at all, and she very much follows where they go and where they review,
Interesting.
and goes out, and we see if we like the food too. I mean, it can be a good resource.
That's
a lot of people on there are being shitheads, but
Right.
some people
But
are
that's a good form of
genuinely.
journalism as well. Is like
Yeah.
she's doing her part too to
She's
find
doing
like
her
these
research.
things
Like
are
you are.
real.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
really know what
and
they're
you have to
talking
weed
about.
through, and it takes a long time. But she's identified a few people, and she follows where they go, and they're usually have great leads. I mean, this is what you do too.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was at the TED Talks a couple of weeks ago, or Ed
Talks.
Talks, not
Talks, yeah.
TED, sorry, Ed. Uh,
Now we're getting sued.
so there's whatever 500
No, he
people in an auditorium in the Berkeley neighborhood, and the thing gets out, and I'm overwhelmed by people right now. I just need to go somewhere, sit down, and have a meal. So I walk into my favorite Colombian
Empanada.
Venezuelan restaurant.
the one right
and-
down the street.
yeah.
one?
And there's
Yeah.
nobody in there, and I just see people streaming past and streaming past, and then Callie walked in the door.
She did,
And I'm like, yay!
and she brought
I know who my
empanadas back to
people
the
are.
office, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Yay!" It was so great, delicious.
What's your favorite story that you've written about, or what's your most favorite interview that you've given? What's the most proud moment that you've had as a writer, and not even professionally? Like, what's the regardless of any awards or anything that you've ever gotten from anything? What's the thing that you every once in a while just dig back up and go, "Fuck, that was good."
Wait, do you ever do that? Because I look back and I'm just like, oh my god,
You're like, I
that's
wish I could
terrible.
change this. Like
That was not the way I
But,
would have
but
started
then
out.
in your head, there's still the
Yeah.
story of like the
Right.
original
Well,
story that you're
yeah.
really sort of like in love with, and
I have two that come to mind. One of them is when I first got the job at Westward. I was asked actually to submit for the restaurant critic because Westward likes to find people who have a voice that maybe aren't well known. So I submitted a story to be the restaurant critic, and I didn't get that. But then I ended up doing this weekly federal restaurant thing. And the story I submitted was taking my family to New Saigon.
Cool.
So it was me and my wife who, live off federal, so we're familiar with the area. And then my parents who were in their 70s at the time, and my sister and her husband and their two, at the time, tween kids. And it was just so much fun to watch them all order and everybody, their personality, I didn't need to explain anything to them. They all picked stuff, and so I wrote about that, and it was super fun.
Cool.
That's awesome.
And then the other one was the Sudan Cafe in Aurora, that I was doing some stories about restaurants that from nationalities that were on Donald Trump's banned list of immigrants.
Yeah.
That's an
That was
angle.
a great thing that Mark did.
So I went in and ate the food. I talked to the owner a little bit. I'm super shy, so I have a really hard time actually, introducing myself to like chefs and restaurant owners. But I wrote the story, and then Colorado Public Radio picked it up.
Wow.
And they came out and they were like, will you come to these restaurants with us and we'll do a story? And I was so amazed at their ability to like take a microphone and stick it in people's faces and ask them the questions that I wanted to ask.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so now this is the complete story. I started it, but they finished it. So that was really cool.
That's so cool.
That's great, Mark.
And we're both like tearing up over here, so you can tell that people actually care about the stories they write. I mean, Do I have to go next?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so, well, mine would both be from Argentina. So
Are you crying on my show?
I'm a little bit.
Yes.
No, it's
You started it.
Get
Get out the tissues.
Dusty.
Yeah, right.
Get a tissue box.
Is this my Oprah moment? Please jump on the couch.
No, you guys know me, so you know that like I will mist up at a good hot dog. So
Excellent.
yeah,
Good.
Kind of a crier.
That's the quote of the night. I will mist up at a good hot dog.
You hear that, Jim?
Write it down.
it happened.
But
already.
only with
It's
an
happened.
a ground antler flour bun.
Gluten-free.
Right. Gluten-free
Gluten-free.
bun.
All antlers are good.
Right.
Obviously.
So, yeah, so thank you for that, alleviating that, like,
We were trying to help.
yeah. So my kind of first big story was published in Draft Magazine way back when, like 2009, and it was a story about this little craft brewery that my ex-husband and I found in Argentina, sort of in the hills outside of Mendoza when nobody was doing craft beer, and definitely not in Mendoza. And this guy had befriended these two Czech scientists who decided they were going to go and climb the Aconcagua, which is like the big, it's like the Everest of Argentina. So these guys go out on this expedition, and like he's sitting there waiting. He's friends. He's like, no, they're not back yet. They're not back yet. It's blizzard conditions. Somebody's going to have to go get them. So he literally by himself launches this whole like rescue, saves them by like a hair frozen on the mountain, brings them back, and the Czech government gives him like a lifetime pass to be a Czech citizen, essentially. Wow. So he leaves Argentina because he's never had the opportunity to leave the country, travel, falls in love with Czech beer and probably Czech women and everything else. Who knows? I didn't ask those questions, but I was focused on the beer. And then comes back to this and ends up in his like greenhouse on his like mountain cabin property, craft brewing all these Belgian style beers.
Wow.
And so I got to interview, his son had gone to architecture school, lived in Buenos Aires, then eventually was like, fuck it, I can't stand it anymore. I'm moving to the country to live with my dad and brew beer. So I interviewed the son. We showed up one day and like the vice president's car was in the driveway. The place was closed. And they're like, well, you can come in, when we're stuffing their trunk full of beer to bring back to Buenos Aires for the president. And I was like, please open, like we just want to interview you or whatever. But the father had ended up becoming like the Mendoza regional slow food representative. They would make all these like handmade mustard, handmade sauerkraut, sausage, like all these amazing things. Not the day we were there, however. But we got a great, and then I got on Skype to interview the original guy before he passed away, like a few months after my story was published. And that's probably like the proudest.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
That's
my
an incredible story.
Yeah.
You-
And now I
like-
reread it and I'm like,
That sounds like a book.
Like one of those things.
Actually, there's so
Oh,
much
yeah.
more there than just the story.
Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
So, and then we
That's
went back
awesome.
several years later after he had passed away, which was kind of amazing. Like it was nice to see him again after that had, and he opened I guess a tasting room, which was like the first tasting room ever in Mendoza. So
Wow.
it was great. Yeah.
That's
What
a
you
book.
got?
I got nothing compared
No,
to
that
that.
was China. Sorry, you guys.
Okay, so one story that was completely frivolous, even on its own merits, especially compared to that, that I enjoyed writing was when I introduced myself to 50 to 80 readers.
I know. What you're saying.
I don't like eggs, and I am a food writer.
I remember
and don't
this.
like
I remember
eggs,
that
and
story
eggs are
too.
Gross.
That's funny.
And you're all full of it that you all like eggs. But I decided to introduce myself that way, and that was a story I'd been wanting to write for a long time. And so that was a fun essay, but more satisfying even than the fun, like, I don't like egg essay was we were told to do a food lover's guide. I mean, I don't get to pick every story that I write. You can attest to this,
Yeah.
especially features in 50 to 80. It's like, all right, we need a drink story in February, and we need a where to eat now in March, and we need 25 best in October. So some things we are told, and then we kind of craft. Callie and I work together to decide what's going to go in that story. But we were told to do food lovers. What does that mean? And we actually turned it into a story about farmers in Colorado and this wonderful Project Worthmore out in Aurora, which is helping our immigrant communities. And we made it more than just, here are the Colorado products we love. 34-degree crisps, which I do love.
Right.
Chili Crunch, I love, but it was more than that. I mean,
Right.
Chili Crunch.
Chili Crunch. You need
Write
to
about
order it by
Chili
the
Crunch
case.
forever.
That's what I do.
But it was I came from more than 10 years of writing about recipes and trying to teach people how to cook at home at every other magazine I'd ever been at, which is great and wonderful. But to be at 50 to 80 now and be able to tell stories about people and
Right.
producers and farmers and ranchers and restaurants is really, it's everything I wanted.
Food lovers, meaning people that love to make
That's
food.
how I took it.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little twist.
Good.
It was good.
If you say anything about Mendoza,
I do not have any experience with Mendoza, sadly. And I've looked
Let's
into that,
go.
though.
Do you like eggs?
I love eggs.
yeah.
I love writing. I really do.
Yeah.
Have them every morning. I really love writing personal essays. Sometimes food, sometimes other realms. But I love making that personal connection to something, whether it's shopping at H Mart with my children who kind of like walk in and, plug their nose because it smells different. All the way to the essay that was anthologized in Best Food Writing. That was about a family ranch that we used to own until I was 13. We raised buffalo on that land. And I ended up getting tied in with a buffalo farm, or bison farmer is what they call it here in Colorado. And followed an animal like from a calf all the way to slaughter.
Oh, wow.
Went to the slaughterhouse.
Cool.
Kind of
Yeah.
that whole.
So Those stories always break my heart. In
and
February when
stock show.
when the stock show's
January.
in town, they
That-
always profile.
This actually-
here's Susie with the thing.
This
and
actually
stuff,
coincided
and it's
with
dead.
stock show because this was a stock show family.
Right.
And yeah, but that had a lot of meaning. I love writing essays. And I always have about 25 kind of midway through that sometimes make it to something and sometimes don't. And then the other kind of moment where I felt like, I don't know, maybe I'd made it. I got to interview Jonathan Gold.
Right.
And that was just such a special experience to spend an hour and a half or whatever talking to him and just really getting. And it was right when City of Gold, the documentary about him, had come out. It was for Flatiron's Food Film Festival.
Right.
And that was just so special and magnified now that he's gone to have that time with him. But those were the two times those are the two kind of venues where, I don't know, I feel pretty good about what I do. Most of the time.
Well, I'm blown away by all of your answers, and clearly, I love talking to smart people. I swear to God, that's
About
just,
food.
Is that
Yeah.
next show?
that's. And next week we'll have smart people on.
How's that gonna?
You're all incredibly eloquent people, and how you guys put things on paper from your mind to the paper, I think is I've struggled mightily with writing a blog, and my mind goes way too fast to actually put some of that stuff on paper. So I know what you do is a bizarrely crazy art form, and for you guys to be able to do that, I'm in awe for sure.
Thank you for
As-
having us.
Yeah, especially for talking about, you guys are obviously passionate about the subject and the subjects that you write about, and Denver is a way better place for what you guys do, and we can all applaud that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we're so lucky that we can all, like, we all are on the same team, whether it's restaurateurs or, people starting an artisan food company or food writers. Like, yeah, we all cover the same stuff, but we all have our own friendships and relationships, and there's no one's out to like scoop anybody's story and whatever crazy stuff goes on in other towns. We're super lucky.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody earlier about how things were like in the early 90s, when chefs were very, very, very protective about new ingredients and new techniques that, they wanted to, and rightfully wanted to be on the forefront of an emerging city and scene. And what has, in my opinion, what has really elevated Denver, aside from what you guys do, is the nitty gritty boots on the ground guys we have to collaborate. We have to share ideas. And I think the beer community does that very, very well. And I think the restaurant community has done that as well. What new things are happening on the scene briefly? Anything that the listeners should know about that's around the corner?
Could more things be opening? I suppose, technically,
Well,
but there's
Send
plenty.
them to the mountains. Send them to the
I know.
mountains.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
plenty.
Well, the
Go.
way home is amazing.
The way home in Carbondale.
Yes, you both
Absolutely.
have been there. I mean,
They're doing a super good job. We need more of that. So I live in the mountains now.
Mhm.
I live in Summit County, so like the Dillon, Keystone area. And not enough is happening up there. So I think there is an incredible opportunity for chefs to come to the mountains. So please hit me up and I will talk
where's
to you
Josh?
all
I was
about
just
it.
like,
So-
where are you?
Cool.
I know. I'm like,
Everyone in
No.
the audience.
seriously, it's an emerging market.
Nice.
It's an amazing market.
We in John Imbrogano's talk, he had mentioned, like former a relationship with you guys. Where can we get in contact with you, and where do we find you? Where do we find to read you?
I'm like
Can't.
so
It
easy.
is impossible to get a hold of us.
It's actually
Don't even
I think we
try.
all of our
ridiculously
handles
easy.
for everything are our
Email or
names.
text me anytime. Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah,
Twitter,
Instagram,
Denise
Facebook.
at 5280.com.
And send a message. Like after that last talk, I got a couple like follows, which was weird, and a couple like friend requests, but no information about who the person is. So if they like send a message and just say, "Hey, I have a taco stand, I have a food truck, I have a business I'm starting, an
Yeah.
idea
Yeah, just
I'm interested
reach
in."
out.
Like give us just a
Reach
little
out.
bit of
Yeah.
information
We
so we
all
can
wanna
help you
know.
out
Yeah,
and help
these-
us help
tell
you.
your stories.
These
So
guys are looking for
we're nice.
content.
We actually
Yeah,
are
So-
always.
Yeah,
and
bring it.
we're looking for people,
Right.
and
Yeah,
people
good
who make
stories.
food.
interesting stories.
So I've got a little picture that kind of looks like me on westward.com. So
So
I think
You
my
look a little more
contact
cranky,
information
though,
is
in
on
that
there,
picture.
or else
He does, doesn't
Doesn't he look cranky?
Yeah, you look
We
like
need
you
to
just
work
put
on
out
that.
a cigarette and you're just
You're
like,
like
God
kinda
damn these fucking people.
Mark's like,
The
can
kids
you
so
imagine?
much
Wait,
nicer
so
than
you
that.
had caricatures of Jason Sheehan. Can you imagine what his like avatar would have looked
For
like?
real?
No.
Right, right.
No. No.
Mark is very approachable.
He's
Yeah,
very
you're all-
approachable, but he
think
has
we
one of
all
those
are.
faces. Like,
And you can
we all are.
easily find us on pretty much any
All the
social
social
aspect.
media.
And heck, you can put our emails up on
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yep. See, they're all
blurted
people
mine
too,
out.
guys.
Just let us know. Hey, I have a restaurant. Please come by. Okay, I will.
Following up kind of what Amanda talked about, we have kind of a new segment called Community Happenings. Contact me with events and stuff like that that's going on in the community. I'm more than happy to put it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then clearly talk about it on the show as well. This week I'm helping promote the Flatiron Food Film Festival. It's happening October 11th through the 14th.
So good.
It's a film festival in Boulder that's focused on food and beverages with film about food. Speakers for each film and culinary events related to the films. They're actually in their 6th year, and if this isn't something that you're privy to, you have to go and experience it. There will be screening 7 feature films at the Boulder Public Library and also at CU Boulder and the Nomad Playhouse. Festival topics vary every year. This year they are presenting an homage to my hero, Anthony Bourdain, with colleagues who knew him well, so you can see those speakers. Doing a deep dive into craft beer on opening night, which is on the 11th. Exploring Cuban food traditions, examining how we raise animals, and much, much more. Guest speakers include Ray Daniels. He's the founder of the Cicerone Certification Program. That's for beer guys. Charlie Papazan, Paul Willis, a founder of Nyman Ranch, and several film directors. Events include a beer tasting dinner, a downtown Boulder beer tour, Cuban food reception, and free children's program on family food traditions. For more information, go to flatironsfoodfilmfest.org. That's plural, flatironsfoodfilmfest.org.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes.
There's also going to be shown a movie called How We Grow, and it's about young Western Slope farmers, and also Slow Money, which is an organization and a whole endeavor out of Boulder to raise money for our local food system.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so go
Super
check that out, guys.
interesting.
It's in Boulder. It's right down the block. Thanks to Hive Industries and the Fox Street Compound for all their love and support for this show. Honestly, this wouldn't be happening without you. My friend Kathy Hawkins, who is my executive producer and really makes the clock tick. I just wake up in the morning, put on a fresh new shirt that I bought yesterday. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, guys. It is Chef or Death. Find me on iTunes at Chef or Death. Like I said, that's new. All the episodes are on there. This is season 4. That'll be soon posted up there as soon as we get that together. Twitter and Instagram, I am Eric_Chiappetta, 2 P's, 2 T's. Facebook, you can check me out on my Chef or Death Facebook page, and cheforddeath.com has all the links to all that stuff. Also, want to give a shout out to somebody that came in from Rebecca, a guy named Alex Libertari. He is opening a restaurant on 24th and Champa, Austria and Eno Beers. So he does a wine and beer kind of concoction that we just had. That was one of the best things I've ever tasted. And if you know me, I like the wine. Find him at www.libertaridenver, LIBERATI Denver.com. Big shout out to his chef, Marta Bissatori? Alex? Bissotti.
So,
They're going to open on October 29th. We really do need a super, super authentic Italian restaurant. Not that we don't have some fantastic ones, but you guys are going to be a fantastic addition to our scene, and we can't wait for it. I am Eric Chiappetta. This is Chef or Death, Season 1, Episode 4. Panel, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
It's
That was
really
so
my
much
pleasure
fun.
to have you guys, and come back anytime. Did we go over our 14-hour time limit? Because I think this was a good one. So listen to the entire thing, because that was fucking good. We did a fucking show, you guys. See you guys next time. Thank you to our studio audience, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
that was so fun.
Yay.
That was really fun.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.